Hello, everyone, and welcome to another episode of Healing Conversations. My name is Inab Avni, and I use the emotion code, body code, and belief code to help people suffering from chronic pain, chronic illness, or unexplained medical conditions. This podcast supports my belief, my message that we can heal ourselves naturally from chronic conditions. And so I hope that you sit tight, and get message that you're meant to hear today. Let's get started. With me in the studio, I have Alex Kassin. Alec Kassin. Alex, so lovely to have you here. Welcome.
Likewise, enough. Don't worry, you're not the first person to mistake me for Alex at first.
It was just a combination of like
Yeah.
everything together. But here we go, Alec. It is, and so let's get started. Tell us something about you.
Yeah. Well, first off, thanks so much just for having me here. And I really resonate with your message that you can heal yourself naturally. That's essentially what I did. So, fun fact about me, I used to be a semi-professional cyclist when I was 18. This was over a decade ago. And I suffered from terrible back pain and including was diagnosed with a ruptured spinal disc. I have that same ruptured spinal disc in my back, hasn't changed, and yet I've been pain free for over a decade. No chronic back pain. And what I do is bring mind body coaching to the world to help the 1.5 billion chronic pain sufferers um, essentially take back their lives.
That's amazing. So let's hear a little bit more about you before, and then a little bit how you get to where you are today.
Yeah. So if we wind back the clock, it's 2011, and I'm racing semi-professionally on the road. So I'm in college, but my priority is really cycling. Like that's what my whole life was geared around. And something that's important to know about me at this time is I'm a pretty all or nothing type personality. So I would, if I wasn't riding my bike, training 4 or 5 hours a day, I was thinking about riding my bike or working on my bike. Or like, for example, I used to take a little Q-tip, the things that you use for your ears. I used to take one of those and clean every single link of my bike chain before a race. Like very kind of personality trait of perfectionism. Um, and I was out on a training ride one day, and it was 2 weeks before what was going to be the biggest race of my career at the time, which is a race that Lance Armstrong had won 2 years prior. And all of a sudden, I'm just riding along and I feel this crippling pain in my lower back. It feels like a lightning rod just in my low back. Somebody's twisting my spine. And I'm like, what's going on? I didn't crash. I didn't get hit by a car or anything. And the pain is so bad that I couldn't actually bend my back at all. I had to stand on my pedals and pedal my way home because my back just hurts so much. So I saw a chiropractor a few days later who said in words that would continue to haunt me, 2 weeks and you'll be back on top. And then 2 weeks turned to 4 weeks, turned to 6, turned to 10. I go back to my whole racing season is shot because I can't ride. I am having trouble sitting in seats just for any period of time. So I had to withdraw from, or I had to go back to college and suffer through a semester of hour-long classes where I couldn't focus. I saw my social life kind of crumbling around me, and in chronic pain. And this is something that I learned the hard way. Like we talk about the pain, but it's really it's how it affects your everyday life, your social life, your job, your career, your confidence, everything. And so
Mhm.
I suffered through that for a very long time before I even got this physical diagnosis.
So no one mentioned emotions. No one went that direction. It was
So
all
it's yeah, nobody mentioned any of that. The only time, no doctors certainly, or no practitioners that I saw. The only time somebody mentioned something, I was at a kind of a social gathering, and there were some folks there. One person who's maybe in his 40s or 50s, he just kind of asked me a question of, do you consider yourself to be an angry person? And I was like, I don't know. That's kind of a weird question to be asking me. And he proceeded to tell me about this doctor. His name is Dr. Sarno, who talked about the connection between repressed emotions and physical pain, specifically back pain. And I remember thinking, because I had received my MRI at the time, which showed that I had a ruptured L4, L5 and a torn L5, S1 spinal disc. And I remember thinking, are you insane? Like, I've seen my MRI. Like, how can you say that like these emotions are causing my pain when I don't even, like, I'm not an angry person. I don't have any of this stuff. Like, you're crazy. And sure enough, it took about another year and a half for him to be proven right.
It's so interesting, right? Because it's exactly that. You're looking at the evidence, and you really can't fathom that actually, it's got nothing to do with emotions. It's all structural. I'm looking at the evidence, and to, like you say, to really have that, you know, kind of thought sink in at some point. It really is like day and night. It really is a journey to get your mind to that place where you think, okay, maybe there was something to it. So how did you?
Yeah.
How was that journey for you?
It's a really good question, because the journey went through trying all of the physical treatments and seeing that I was not getting success with them. Like, it took me going to physical therapists, going to chiropractors, acupuncture, getting nerve root injections, all sorts of physical treatments. I tried them, and nothing worked. For example, the nerve root injections that I got, my pain would go away for maybe a week, or not go away, but it would get better for about a week, 2 weeks, and then it would just come back. And that happened twice. And after the second time, I was forced to withdraw from college because my pain came back
Mm.
so bad. And when I was withdrawn, my primary job was to heal, right? I wasn't taking classes. I was at home, mostly bedridden or eating my meals standing up. I was on opioids. I was basically, if I wasn't in bed, I was either eating my meals or going to a practitioner doctor's appointment. And I, going back to this kind of perfectionistic personality, I would follow my practitioner's advice to the letter. I
Mm.
would do everything that they said to do, and I would avoid the things they said not to do. And I would see this pattern of, after a month or 2 or 3 of really going all in with them, following everything and not seeing results, them kind of taking a step back and being like, well, don't know what to do now. And I had a few kind of practitioners who moved on from me. And I just remember being so disheartened by that. So it took me doing all of these physical treatments, not seeing results, to be open to something bigger. The other thing that happened as well is I started to question, I started to read some of the science, and I started to question why somebody could have an MRI that looked perfect of their back. They could be in immense pain. And somebody else who had an MRI like mine, maybe herniated disc, ruptured discs, bulging discs, degenerative disc disease, arthritis, etc., they could have no back pain whatsoever. I started to ask, like, how would that be the case? And on the days where I am doing everything the doctors, practitioners said to do, of icing my back, not doing too much physical activity, taking care of myself, why could on those days I might have more pain than on the days where I'm doing stuff like sitting or not icing my back, not doing the stretches, not doing the exercises? So it started to dawn on me that there was something else at play here. I didn't know exactly what.
And at the same time, as you're going through trying to find a solution and a cure, and I'm going to say maybe a procedure or something that is going to fix your back, I imagine that your mental emotional state was getting, more and more stressed or stretched
Yes.
because of,
Yeah.
being able to go back to the cycling and also what future, right?
Absolutely. And this is, the hidden costs of chronic pain. My identity being ripped from me was, I think, the biggest cost. So I went from being somebody who was defined by cycling to not having that. And not only not having that, but the community that I was part of, my team kind of moved on. A lot of the friends that I had been riding with or been on a team with, they were busy with their own lives, and essentially I saw the world continue to rotate while I was stuck. And that, for an 18-year-old is a tough realization to have.
It's a really,
And
really tough, actually. I mean, I really do. I'm thinking about what you went through, and I can really imagine how devastating that was. And not only that your everything is, like you say, your identity is taken away from you, but also there is no cure. So it really is a double-edged thing, you know. It's really, yeah,
Yeah,
I feel it.
absolutely. And there was times where it just felt really hopeless because I was like, what the heck? I'm doing everything the doctors said to do. Why am I not getting any better? And at the same time, it was really difficult for my peer group, which was dwindling in numbers because I was, at home, out of college, I didn't really have energy to see folks. I was depressed. And it was hard for people to understand as well, because it's not like chronic pain is something that comes with a cast or
Mm,
something physical that you can see. It's very much, underneath the surface. And so, especially for, teenagers, folks in their early 20s that I was hanging out with, they didn't get that because they hadn't had that lived experience yet. So it was a very isolating time. What I will say though is, I credit my parents for so much during that time. I remember I was in bed one day. I'd gone with my parents to a doctor's visit, and it didn't go well. Kind of the same old thing, same old pattern was repeating itself. And I just remember being really depressed. And my dad came into my room and said something along the lines of, we're going to keep trying until we get it right, until we find the thing that works. And those were the exact words I needed to hear at that moment. Both he and
mm,
my mom were just incredibly supportive, and I don't think in those times when it's really dark, I think it helps so much to have somebody to show you some light, and hold space for you. So
I definitely appreciate that, because it's really that thing of, you know, how where do I fit anymore?
yeah,
If I have to be here, really, who are the ones going to look after me, and how long, and will they lose their patience, and how would they treat me if they do?
exactly. And that was a huge fear of mine enough. This was during the Great Recession, 2011. Coming from a middle class family, and I just felt like a huge burden to the family, like somebody whose identity was built on achievement, whether it was school or cycling, having taken all of that away and really being seen with the bare bones of, and like the hard questions of, are people still going to like me? Are people still going to love me if I don't have these accomplishments and these things? And realizing, kind of hitting rock bottom and seeing that was the case was just a really profoundly, moving experience in the middle of all of this.
Mhm. And so a year passes.
Yeah.
How do you slowly or finally get
Yeah.
into that direction that actually maybe there's something other than structural situation going on?
Yeah. So a year goes by, and I'm not much better. And I saw the doctor, and one of them said super casually, like, "Oh, you know, we could go in and just kind of cut off that part of your disc that is, sticking out." And I remember like this feeling of, I am now 19 years old. I am not going to have back surgery at 19. There's got to be a better way to do this. And that was kind of an inflection point of, all right, there has to be something else out here. And I, was actually given a copy of Healing Back Pain by Dr. John Sarno, by my mom. Um, and at first, similar to the person who approached me at that party, I was like, "There's no, like, this isn't for me." And then
I've seen the MRI, right? Why are you
you've
giving me a
seen the
book? I've
MRI,
seen the
you know the
MRI.
story, right? And then I think I got to the point where I was seriously considering, not considering, but I was presented with the idea of surgery, that I was like, "All right, I'm listening now. There's something else at play." And when I read his book, I started to see myself on every page. The personality traits, the people pleasing, perfectionism, low self-esteem. I I saw more science about how, herniated discs don't always lead to pain, and everything just started to click. And Sarno talks about the importance of uncovering repressed emotions, especially anger. And I started to take a look inward and see, like, yeah, I did have a lot of anger about my situation, about, well before the pain started. The I was, if I'm being honest with myself, really um, scared about the race that I was going to be doing, the one that Lance Armstrong had won, because I knew I was not going to do very well. I was going to be spit out the back pretty quickly after the race started, and that was going to be a huge threat to my identity as well. And so, in a way, I deeply believe that, our brain, our body, our mind are always trying to do us a favor, even in a way that doesn't necessarily make sense, in order to protect us, in order to serve us in some way, shape, or form. And I started to see how my, that mechanism was at play when this pain started. It's like, well, if you're laid up in bed, you don't have to deal with, the potential that your identity could be crushed. And, for my brain, a little bit of pain or a lot of pain was preferable to that identity hit.
I First of all, there is a sentence that I have to share because I really like it, and it's not mine, so I don't know who to credit. So, but someone said, right, when we get what we want, it's with God's permission, and when we don't get what we want, it's with God's protection. And I like that because it helps to put things in perspective.
Yeah.
Um, but I'm very interested in what you're saying. You know, so here you are, and in retrospect, you're able to see that there were a lot of traits. Like you said, the perfectionism, the people pleaser, the low self-esteem, and you can see that you can make sense that actually you were going too far with this
Yeah.
cycling, trajectory that you chose for yourself.
Yeah.
But what does the walk look like, you know, on the ground? What is it? How do you reach out and start to see that this is what caused it, or this is contributed to it, and actually how do you change from that
Yeah.
to your new version?
Yeah. Really good question. So I think there's a, I'm from an athletic background, so I'll say there's a marathon component and there's a sprint component to it. The sprint component is learning about just the education of pain, about how pain is a protector. Pain isn't always associated with injury. Learning that if you had a group of 100 people who were in back pain, and then 100 people who aren't in back pain, the number of back abnormalities in those groups would be roughly the same. So starting to just understand that and applying it to your situation, that was a key point for me. Starting to see myself in, pay attention to the fluctuations in my symptoms, pay attention to the fact that when I was more stressed, I might have more pain. And
Mm.
so starting to see, like, oh, there actually, hold on, I have a measure of control over this. It doesn't have this mind of its own. Like, there's an element of influence that I have over these symptoms. The marathon component is kind of, once that's out of the way, and once there's the understanding and the realization that this is actually what is contributing to my pain. It's the emotions. It's essentially the brain that is wired in fear. Then it becomes a matter of, okay, how do we start to unpeel these layers and get to the core of, who we are? And that involved a lot of, I did this work on my own for a while, and it was, a combination of really kind of talking to my brain and journaling about, past experiences, kind of uncovering places where anger, fear, where I wasn't my authentic self. And that was really, really helpful. And that got me to a place where, within a number of weeks, all of the pain that had been in my lower back for over 2 years shifted to my mid back, which is actually a good sign. For some people, they're like, "Oh my gosh, that's terrible." And for me, it's like, no, that means it's working. That means you're onto the mechanism. But what would happen is there started to be this game of cat and mouse. Of, I would treat it the same way. Of, like, this symptom is generated by my brain, not a structural abnormality. It would go away after a while. And then I started to get shin splints when I was running. Then I started to get tightness in my quads, or pain in my arm. And it was kind of like, until you start to do this deeper work on yourself, this is just going to be a game of whack-a-mole. And so that's when I started to work with a therapist who was specifically trained in TMS, or essentially mind-body pain syndromes. And that's when I really started to see, the ways in which I was repressing emotion, the ways in which, like, why the people pleasing trait would come out, why this perfectionistic trait would come out. And little by little, I started to see those symptoms disappear. So there was to kind of sum all that up, sprint component of this is what's actually happening, really relating to it. And then the marathon component of this kind of just slow, steady march toward understanding myself more completely, and bringing out my own authenticity, kind of shining a light in the darkness, if you will.
I think it's very interesting, everything that you are describing, and I'll have another. Well, I have lots of questions, but I want to ask first. At what point, when you started getting better, did you have the conversation with yourself? Am I going back to cycling, or actually not?
Yeah, good question. So I remember I was feeling better, and I was out to dinner with my parents one night, and I just remember talking to them and saying, hey, I think I could still be a professional cyclist. I'm only, how old was I at the time? I was 20 when this happened. And I was like, yeah, I could still do this. And then I started to kind of think, do I really want to do this? Because, I loved cycling, but for me, I would always watch, the races on TV. And, a huge part of bike races, as many spectators know, are the crashes, right? It is a part of the job where you will end up on the road going 30, 40 miles an hour in just a layer of spandex between you and asphalt. And for me, I don't think I ever really, I was never really comfortable with that. Like, that always really terrified me. And I had a few crashes, nothing that bad, but it was enough to, scare me. In terms of, putting the work in and, the training itself, I felt like I could do that. I would have needed to step it up. But I realized after a while, like, this actually really isn't what I want to be doing. And, the quote that you shared earlier, it makes me think of this idea of seeing life happening for you and not to you. And in that same way, I think this whole experience was a way of life happening for me to show me, a different path that I was meant to go on. And don't get me wrong, I still love cycling. I have so much respect and admiration for, my teammates who have continued to go on and get to literally the highest levels of the sport, stuff that I, probably would not have been able to do, even if I had put my whole heart and soul into it. But yeah, it really came to a point where I was ready to walk away. And what I did actually is I spent 1/2 season racing again. So I wanted to prove to myself that I could do it. And I got to do a race in my hometown with my friends and my family cheering me on. And I was okay with that being my last race. That's how I wanted to make a comeback, and I did.
Nice. I speak with a lot of people, and some people say, oh, I have, I asked them, what's wrong with them? What are they suffering from? Yeah. And they say, oh, I have TMS problems. And to me, it kind of makes me chuckle, because it's like, if you know that it's TMS, you're nearly there.
Yeah.
You just, but then I see that actually, even understanding that the problem is TMS, mind-body relation, connected, it's not necessarily enough to go ahead and do the work. But what you're saying, really, it resonates with what I do as well, because I really believe that the chronic situations, chronic conditions, they're not a life sentence. They're here to help you pause so that you can get back on the right trajectory of your life according to your higher power, higher being, higher knowledge.
Yeah.
And when you are so focused on something before you get the chronic condition, you're so focused on something, there is no way that you will have that conversation. Is this, is that the right trajectory? Am I going in the right direction? We don't. So the body is like saying, okay, I have to introduce something else here so that you can pause.
Yeah.
rearrange some things, reflect, make the learnings, and then come out and back on track, basically.
Yeah, I fully agree with that. It's like a part of us that wants to be heard, and it's interesting you mentioned seeing people who say, "Oh yeah, I have TMS, and yet I'm still struggling," which is very common and very normal. I think I've had my own share of things where I realize, "Oh yeah, this is mind body definitely," and yet I'm not able to get to the deeper layers of some of these things. I think that's when it takes working with a coach or practitioner, someone like yourself, doing work that you wouldn't necessarily be able to shine a light on yourself in the same way. Or maybe you get there, but it would take years, when with a practitioner it can take days or a week. So I think that piece is really, really important, because we all limit ourselves in ways that we don't realize, and it takes, I think, seeing that outside influence and having somebody to hold space for you in order for you to see that yourself, which is I think it's so important that there are folks out there doing this work.
And now this is also what you're doing.
Yes,
Right.
absolutely.
So,
Absolutely.
so tell me a little bit about that move, that shift from recognizing that you've done the work and you're no longer in pain, or at least you know that when the pain comes back, there's probably some stressors that
Yeah.
didn't realize that they were there, and to then
Yeah.
taking that step to deciding to do for others, mainly athletes, what you've done yourself.
Yeah, absolutely. So I deeply believe that the world can be changed with this approach. I think medicine can be changed. I think there's so much untapped potential that we're going to see unleashed in the next 10, 20, 30 years, to heal without drugs, surgery, physical treatments. um, I didn't start out on that path, so I had my recovery, and I just had this zest for life that I was 20, 21 at the time, and I was just so grateful to have my life back, to be physically unrestricted. And I went through college, and by happenstance, I ended up working at LinkedIn for it ended up being 5 years. I thought I was going to be there for maybe a year and a half. Ended up working in San Francisco, in Ireland, coming back to San Francisco, and there was LinkedIn had a head of mindfulness and compassion programs. His name is Scott Shute. So think of a big tech company, and kind of the Silicon Valley vibe. And there was a large ethos around compassion and mindfulness, and that kind of reignited my journey a little bit. I got a chance to run workshops on topics like building resilience and compassion in the workplace and self-compassion, and I things that I had been practicing but not really sharing with others. And I was like, oh, this feels really good. I kind of want to get back into this. And at the same time, it had always been in the background, this the chronic pain work. If anybody would say, hey, I've been dealing with back pain or migraines or whatever, I'd be like, you have to read this book, or like, let's sit down and have a conversation. And I wasn't a coach at the time. I was just super passionate about it. And then after the pandemic happened, I realized that my core job at LinkedIn, which was monetization strategy and operations, was not for me anymore. And I wanted to do this, let's say, inner work or consciousness work full time. And I began training at the beginning of 2022, specifically to help people with TMS, and opened my coaching in 2023, at the beginning of 2023. And so it's been such an enriching experience to see folks get their lives back, and to continue to learn more and more and more about this topic, because there's been so much research that's come out in the past few years alone. It's starting to become a little bit more mainstream, and it's a satisfaction that I derive that I was not able to get in the corporate world, period, end of story. And so it was really kind of going back to the example of all the physical treatments that I needed to try to find in order to really find that those weren't the path for me. I had to go through, some work and some jobs and the 9 to 5 that I didn't really enjoy as much in order to get to, the aliveness of of this work.
We always end up where we're meant to be, right?
Exactly.
So tell me, because I'm really curious about your kind of discovery calls that you do with clients.
Yeah.
You know, because I'm sure that the pushbacks that they give you, you've lived through them, right? You can say to them, look, when I had this, when I experienced this, so how does that go?
Yeah, it's always interesting. I learned early on that I cannot convince anybody of anything. Period.
Yeah.
It's I literally I can provide an invitation, and so most of the people that I'll speak with about just kind of casually about chronic pain, I'll share something with them about this not being maybe not being structural. And sometimes they'll be open to it, but most of the time they'll be like, oh, okay, cool, that's nice. All right, you're kind of one of those like woo-woo people. Um, Despite the fact that there's mountains of research and doctors who are doing this work.
Mm,
But for me, so if somebody really is interested enough to want a discovery call, I offer those for free, and I'll give I cannot make a diagnosis. I'm not a medical doctor. I'm not a therapist, but I do have an evaluation based on the training that I've done under Dr. Howard Schubiner, who's one of the pioneers of mind-body medicine in kind of the Western form, um, and able to give a clear indication of whether a mind-body component is at play. And for me, I can only offer that up and say, here is the path. You don't need me to walk this with you. Like, there are resources out there that, if you're a very independently minded person, you can do this. However, I have found on my journey that it is so helpful to have somebody who has been there, who has done the work, who's been through those peaks and those valleys in order to help guide the way. And so it's really, my coaching is very, it's the opposite of mollycoddling. It's very, I think we all have people in our lives that are um, maybe not telling us what we need to hear because it's uncomfortable or because they don't want to rock the boat. I don't try to be provocative, but I do always endeavor to tell my clients the honest truth. And so, that's what I'll do with people. And
mm,
I'll work really deeply with people over the period of 1, 2, or 3 months in order to uncover and make some really rapid progress with them. So the feeling that a lot of people have after these calls, even just 20, 30 minutes, can be one of hope, of at least, if I'm able to give somebody just a sliver of hope that they didn't have before, then it's absolutely worth it for them and for me.
and I think this is really important to kind of mention again, that this is not something that you or me or anything in the world that we do. It's not up to us to convince people or to say, hey, here's a promise or anything like that. It's just really to say, I know it works. I know it can work for you too. And when you're ready for it, come here, come over, and we'll do this together. And really, by offering that space and trust, this is really encouraging, because people can see that actually you're not just trying to, you're not just trying to get their money, and also you've seen enough of this thing to know that there's enough success stories and case studies for things that
Yeah.
have worked, for them to be able to say, okay, I mean,
Yeah. You're not the first one.
yeah, exactly. Yeah, this is not an
Yeah,
experiment.
exactly. Exactly. And something I wanted to mention on that regard is I just lost my train of thought. If it's important, it'll come back to me.
It will come
Um,
back.
yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
So tell me, until your subconscious mind delivers the the missing piece. Um, so now you choose to work mainly with athletes and active
Yeah.
people. What
Yes.
what led you there?
So I think there's a few different things. One, I have worked with all number of folks, people who are high performance athletes to people who are they just want to be able to walk normally again.
Mhm.
Um, but what I find with athletes is, one, it's my personal experience. I know the stresses and the strains, not just on your body, but on your mental state that comes from athletic performance, that comes from maybe tying your identity to your sport and building your self-worth on your performance, and the challenges that come with unraveling that, and how difficult that can be. So, my personal experience there. Second, I believe that athletes, they tend to be very committed to the process, right? They're people who are dedicated. They'll put in the time, they'll put in the work. And I love working with dedicated clients because it has to be a two-way street. The third thing is that all of the tools that are useful for this healing can be used to unlock a higher level of athletic performance as well. Leveraging self-compassion, resourcing. I've used a number of tools last year when I decided to run a marathon without training. A lot of the tools that I would use, to help myself heal or feel good in a day-to-day are what I used on that, marathon experience. And so there's that piece. And then there's this fourth thing that I think is really important is people follow athletes. They follow the examples of their favorite athletes. And I believe that sports is just a ripe ground for mind-body pain, TMS symptoms. And if there are athletes who are willing to do the work despite, and who haven't seen success despite the best doctors, the best medical teams, all of that, if there are people who are willing to share their story, like, hey, this non-surgical, non-invasive intervention actually helped me avoid surgery and take my life back, and now I'm pain-free. The whole world can take notice of that. And I think that can have a trickle-down effect and change the way in which medicine is practiced. And so that's like an ambition of mine, is to work with athletes at the highest level, because I think it can be a huge performance advantage, which can then benefit millions and millions of people and increase the visibility of this work.
Yeah, amazing. I think you're right. Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely. I think that
sorry, go ahead.
No, it's okay.
I was going to say, segue a little bit, but my subconscious helped me remember what I was going to share beforehand.
Yeah.
And that's, I think you can relate to this as well. All of this. Oh, hi, little thumbs up. That's fine. My subconscious is agreeing with me. This is not about having somebody else do the work for you. I think that's why it can be a bit of not a harder sell, but a different sell when it comes to this work, right? We're not saying that, you can lie on this operating table and somebody's going to have the surgical intervention, and then in 6 weeks you're going to get better. It's going to prompt you to look inward and hold space for some difficult questions. And sometimes it's really challenging to do that. We live in a quick fix culture, but ultimately the people who are willing to walk the walk are the ones who make the biggest strides forward.
Totally agree. Very, very happy that your subconscious mind reminded you of what you were going to say.
Yeah.
It's I notice that with my clients as well. My clients, sometimes when they are willing to trust, it's everything. And when they are, basically, sometimes I can see that they're just putting sticks in their own wheels, and it's like it's let's take the wheels out, take the sticks out. It's okay.
Yeah. Yeah.
So tell me, Alec, you have a program at the moment that you're running. Tell us a little bit about that.
Yes. So really excited about this. Basically, I teamed up with a fellow TMS coach, Miriam Gauchi Bongiovanni. She runs Pain Outside the Box. And we both have these stories of being athletes. I was a cyclist. She was a rock climber, and had these scary structural diagnoses. We're told that we're going to have issues for the rest of our lives, and then making these recoveries. And we realized that there wasn't much out there for athletes and active people who want to get back to their sport. They want to excel. They want to live an active life again. And there wasn't a whole lot tailored specifically for them. So we created a program called Pain-Free Comeback that is geared toward athletes and active people and helping them do all of the work that we would do in a one-to-one coaching setting, right? Believing that understanding that your body is Herculean, that you don't have to just manage your pain. You can actually become pain-free. And we're just really excited about that. We launched it at the beginning of March, and we've had some tremendous feedback on it already. And so it's an online recorded program, and it also comes with the ability to ask us questions. So you get that support, that guidance. We're building a little pain-free comeback community online as well. So you're not alone on this journey. And yeah, it's been a really cool little pet project to see grow and grow and grow.
Nice. Well, congratulations on the program. And of course, for anyone interested, the information of that will be in the show notes. Well, Alec, we're nearly coming to the end of the program. Tell me, is there anything, what message would you like to leave our viewers or listeners with today?
That's a great question. So this work, yes, it's about becoming pain-free, but it's also about something deeper. And you alluded to this earlier. I think it takes sometimes it takes a big event in our lives in order to show us that there's a different way to live. And something that's interesting that I've observed in client after client is that their journey starts out just wanting to be rid of pain, wanting to be rid of their symptoms. And then something interesting happens along the way. They see the ways in which they've been holding themselves back. They see how there's a greater measure of authenticity and freedom that's available to them. And the journey becomes about that more so than it does the pain. And that is really what this deeper work is about. It's about becoming pain-free, but if you commit to this process, you can discover parts of yourself in a greater sense of yourself than what you ever thought was possible. And anybody who's listening out there who is on their journey, who's in pain, who's struggling with something, I offer my compassion, and I also say to stay the course, because it will pay off. Don't know when, don't know how. It might not happen in the way you expect, but it will pay off. So just keep believing that you have an inner light that is guiding you and guiding you in the right direction.
I love that. I love that very much. It really is like what you said earlier. It's happening for you, and when you're able to let go of the victimhood and the not resistance. What is the word I'm looking for? The anger, the frustration that comes with that.
Yeah.
Resentment. Yeah. Thank you. Then you're able to start with curiosity, and when you get to that phase of curiosity, that's it. You're on the horse. You can really see incredible results. Really exciting journeys. Really exciting, and so wonderful that you're there helping your clients, and I'm sure the program is going to be phenomenal. People really, really need that.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. Can I add one last thing as well?
Yes, of course. Yes.
It's that I don't think my story is unique. There's so many people who are out there. You've interviewed them. You know this yourself, being in this space. There are so many incredible stories out there, and it can happen to you. So that's the other thing. It's like, with all the healing journeys, all the healing stories, it can be easy to put somebody on a pedestal. I think that this can be common and normal for people to achieve.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, this is exactly the message of this podcast, right? To say, okay, you something happened, but you don't have to go down the route of, medication, surgeries, and all of that. Actually, let's go in to see what is available alternatively, naturally, and let's have that conversation. Because yes, if we had a directory of everything that's been done and is done successfully naturally, your condition, whatever that is probably already there. So let's bring in some trust and curiosity and hope.
Amen. Amen.
Brilliant. Alec, on this note, we will end for today. Thank you so much for being here and sharing your story and everything that you bring to the world. Thank you so much.
Thanks so much, Enough.
Thank you.